Hi, I'm Matt Allard, and we're at the ACS headquarters here in North Sydney, and I'm with the ACS Technical Committee, well, two members of the ACS Technical Committee, Tom Gleeson and Ben Allen. Now, today we're going to be discussing all things FX9.
Yes.
You guys have been involved in testing out the FX9, going through it, doing some tests. Tom, initial impressions.
Well, let me first, a few thanks. The technical committee is made up by a bunch of people, and I'd like to thank Susan Lumsden, Alexi Vanamois, Nito Tamburi, Dragon Studios were a big help, Carl Jenner's helping us out, and we have our amazing Pal Akhtal, our cinematographer scientist, who's also helping us out. So all this work is a bunch of people.
Team effort.
Yeah, FX9 is a complex camera.
Yeah.
And I do believe the nature of all digital cinema cameras now are incredibly complex beasts. So I have no idea, but I imagine the team at Sony that builds the FX9, there would be dozens and dozens of engineers, scientists, technicians, software. It could be 100 people working for years.
Yeah, and you could spend weeks testing this camera, any camera of this kind of complexity. You could spend weeks testing it and still have stuff that you haven't uncovered. What we're looking at is we've identified some key parameters that we wanted to look at and really hone in on, okay, let's benchmark them to a certain point and do that in a quantifiable way.
Yeah, and partly in the context of the FS7.
Yes.
In other words, the FX9, what is that going to give you over the FS7? We were chatting to Matt earlier and saying the FS7 has proven to be, I think, the world's most popular Super 35 cinema camera.
And so it's a very familiar kind of point of reference as a starting point for, okay, this is something that a lot of people know very well. And so if we benchmark our tests to that starting point, then that gives you guys something to kind of know, okay, well, if this is how the FS7 is performing and this is how the FX9 is performing relative to that, then it's something we can kind of understand. What we thought we'd do is a camera exposure latitude test. So how much correctable latitude is there in the images with certain parameters. And so we're comparing the FS7 in 2000 ISO, its native ISO. We didn't have time to test both base ISOs. There's the dual base ISO in the FX9, so we went with the 800 and just looked at the over and under exposures there side by side. So what you'll see.
Shall we play?
Well, let's play. And so we'll see at each point the FS7 first. So this is shooting S-Log3, S-Gamut 3 Cine with the S-Log LCA LUT, which is the one that I think most people like.
Are you not changing any parameters here? And what we're seeing, I think, is this is like straight out of the camera, and then they turn, and then you're doing a correction based on correct exposure. That's
right, yes. So they turn away, and then as they turn back, we dissolved the corrected image. And so that correction is a very simple exposure correction happening with printer lights in Resolve underneath the LUT. So it's not happening after the Rec 709 conversion. It's happening in log space.
And you've chosen two models here with different skin tones, and you've got someone with a glittery top, what should people actually be looking here?
So what we're looking for here is how the contrast changes, any color shifts, the noise changes, and how the skin tones are rendered most particularly. And so we're looking for where we see any kind of breakup or clipping in overexposure and loss of tonal values in underexposure.
Now, were you expecting that both of these cameras were going to look fairly similar, or did you have sort of an open mind going in that maybe the FX9 is going to be completely different to the FS7?
I think, we definitely went in with an open mind, but with the theory that they were going to have a lot in common. Because there's such a similar design philosophy behind both cameras. And
I think Sony would deliberately not take the look too far away. The camera's got to sit within a family of other cameras, and there'll be shoots mixing FS7s and FX9s. I mean, you can certainly spot the difference.
There is a difference for sure, and certainly the difference in the color space is real. Like Sony's talking about that it's taking a lot of the color science from the Venice, and I think that's quite visible. It's not just marketing speak. So four stops over, and that's clearly uncorrected as vastly over, and correcting back that still looks quite normal. to my eye.
Pretty good.
Now, bearing in mind the actress on the right has light skin and is slightly closer to the lamp, so she's probably a third of a stop over on reflected values, and still correcting back.
Okay,
Very nice.
I'm
We're
seeing
starting to get some
break up here.
Yeah.
Some clip, I should say.
And at 4 2/3 of a stop,
It's on.
I mean, that's a long way over.
Yeah.
And I think that's really...
So how would you compare this to other digital cinema cameras that are on the market in terms of how much you can overexpose?
I think it's up there with most of the kind of the benchmark cameras, to my eye. What do you reckon, Tom?
That's a hard one, but it's very good.
Yeah. And at 5 stops over, I think both cameras are very much broken. They're on... You're starting to really lose tonal separation, as well as the highlights clipping. But even if you look at the darker skin tone, it's a little bit further away from the light. There's still some real harshness in the highlights there on her.
Is there any sort of colour tone difference between the FS7 and FX9?
Yeah, the FS7 tends a little bit more to magenta, and the FX9 tends a little bit more towards green.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they are both on preset white balance using the same lens, so those are tendencies in the cameras themselves, which we've balanced out a little bit.
Yeah, and I will add with the lighting, we use a mixture of sources. We use one small HMI and a bunch of different brand LEDs,
Yeah.
all through one large frame.
And in grading this up, I think they look quite good. Like
Yep.
they balance out quite well.
Okay.
2 stops under, I think both cameras are really performing quite well still.
Yep.
So at 4 stops over and 2 stops under, both cameras are very comfortable. And so
Yep.
you've got a 6-stop range there where if you can't get it within 6 stops, you've probably got bigger problems
Yes,
than which
although
camera.
You should be choosing a different occupation.
Yes,
yeah,
yes.
that's right.
Having said that, of course, the test is not so much about. It's the nature of many shots which have such extreme ranges within them.
Absolutely,
you
yeah.
have to make that
Yep.
call.
Yes, yeah. So this is the space you can play in.
Yes, yes.
So 3 stops under on both cameras, you're really starting to push them. So interestingly, against the early digital cameras, which really were biased towards shadows, like most digital cinema cameras now, these cameras are weighted much more to favour the highlights.
Yeah.
And so, you know, you've got a lot more latitude in the highlights than in the shadows, like film.
So how would you summarise the improvement in
What I'm seeing there is much tighter, finer grain on the FX9. So it's,
Yeah.
to my eye, it's a similar amount of grain, but the grain's smaller.
Yeah, and you use the word grain
Yes,
in place
yes,
of
yeah,
noise.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Technically, of course, we're talking about noise. Stretch out this contrast here in these underexposed shots to get a much better looking image. But what we wanted to really see here is how the underexposure is affecting the contrast and how much you lose
Yeah.
there. So that's, I thought the results of that were not far off what we were expecting, and
Yeah.
I guess hoping that it
Yeah.
would be a similar range to the FS7, a little bit better, particularly in underexposure, which is exactly what
Big
we
thing.
saw, and very useful, and a little bit nicer noise. I think it's finer noise, and it's a little bit nicer on the eye than the FS7, which does get very chunky when you
Very quickly.
quite quickly.
So dynamic range between the FS7 and FX9, fairly similar?
I would say similar dynamic range. The total dynamic range, I think, is very similar between these two cameras. I would say the usable dynamic range on the FX9 is slightly bigger within that.
And that's a much more important thing, actually, the usable dynamic range, not just the number.
It's the only really
Thing that matters.
interesting number,
Yeah,
really,
yeah.
to be honest. So would you
You
give
can
it?
argue all day about total dynamic range,
Yeah,
whether
and
it's
it's
this
always
or that.
a tough call.
Yeah.
Would you give the FX9 a stop over the FS7 in the
Yeah,
shadows?
a stop and a half maybe in the
Stop and a half,
shadows.
okay.
Yeah, and very similar in the highlights.
Yeah, that's
Which is great.
that's a huge improvement,
Yeah,
really,
yeah.
for a single generation of camera.
From a very usable base.
Okay,
there.
okay. So shall we have a look and play now some of our dual ISO tests?
Yeah, yeah.
Where we took advantage of the 4000 ASA and compared that to 800 ASA. We created a scenario of a typical shoot where you've got an interview with someone you need to have a chat with. First one is the FX9. We're on a 50. We're using the Cine EI S-Log 3 at 800 ASA. Incredibly clean picture. Here, this is no LUT applied. Here we are with instead using S-Cinetone. So we've gone out of Cine EI mode and we're in the 800.
The interesting thing about the S-Cinetone is it's effectively like shooting S-Log with a LUT baked in.
Yes.
So this is more for if you want to turn around material quickly where no one's going to bother grading.
And as a
it's a really
comparison-
good compromise,
Yeah, and as a comparison, here's 709.
which is definitely harsher. So
Yeah.
the S-Cinetone's
I like the
giving
Cinetone.
a lot better roll off,
Yeah,
and I think better skin tones.
he's handsome.
Now, do all these profiles have different base ISO levels?
Yes, we'll come back to that, Matt, because that's a mind. I won't use the word. See,
It's a mind thing.
But have a look at this FS7 and the difference in the way it shows the skin tones.
Yeah,
Represents
and I
the
think
skin
that's where
tones.
we're seeing the Venice colour science coming into play on the
Absolutely.
skin tones there.
And here we are now. We've bumped to 4,000 ASA, and I see, to my eye, no colour difference.
I wouldn't pick it. If,
And no
if I was
noise
looking at it in the
differences.
grade, I
Yeah.
wouldn't pick which was
Yeah,
which.
I couldn't pick the 800 4,000 when I was doing the footage. Now here's FS7. It at 4,000 ASA does a bit better than I thought it would. Beginning to see noise, but Cinetone now, and in the Cinetone mode, it will gain up the picture. So we've now gone to 8,000 ASA. Damn, that's clean.
Yep.
That is utterly, utterly usable.
In 4K.
In 4K, yes. And here's our FS7, beginning to show the pressure. You can see that noise building up. Again, when we shot this stuff, there's a good strong exposure going down onto the sensor here.
Yeah.
Does it automatically switch between the two different base ISOs, or do you have to physically actually go into the menu and change it from low to
I think
high?
you can put it onto a button if you would. There's a whole bunch of configurable buttons. It's not a button I would probably have configured because I'd want to be able to dig in because I don't want to accidentally be pressing that button all the time. But again, here's our Cinetone 12,800 ASA. Oh my God. We did a couple of versions.
yeah.
This is with a little tiny bit of Final Cut noise reduction. But here's the internal noise reduction. And there's no penalty in that. I can't see any plasticizing in the skin or the
amazing.
face. That's 12,800 ASA.
The most appealing thing about this camera is this autofocus for this exact situation.
It's a
that you've
huge
used.
thing. I know autofocus is not new.
Yeah.
I know Canon has been a pioneer in this field. But autofocus, as done in this camera, is
Yep.
the beginning, I think, in some ways, of autofocus truly becoming the revolution that needs to be. This is a full frame camera. And the EVF in this camera is a step up from the FS7.
Yep.
No question. It's now a 1280p EVF, which is not shabby, but it's not brilliant.
It'd be hard to be manually pulling focus through the lens with this kind of depth of field.
Yes, very
accurately.
hard.
Yeah.
And for it to actually be accurate when you're dealing with 4K.
Yep.
But
And for the sort of the one-man band owner operator who's likely to buy an FX9, I mean,
That's
a lot
a
of times you're going to
situation-
be in a situation in a room which
Exactly.
you don't have a lot of time to light, you don't have a lot of time to control things,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
you'd probably want to run shallow depth of field in a lot of circumstances
Exactly.
because you don't
Yeah.
want to see the background because it's ugly or you can't do anything with
It's
it.
a situation this camera is going to end up in a lot.
yeah, I will add with that low light capability and the ability to run really fast primes at 1.4, you can be in scenarios where the levels of light,
Very.
the light can be handsome, it can be a lovely soft source,
Yep.
but no longer needs to be a bright source. But the autofocus is also incredibly configurable. You can change the speed with which the autofocus changes. There's a whole bunch of different modes. My favourite mode is if I was doing a documentary, I can controlling the focus on the focus ring, but I can tell the camera to pop the focus to the nearest thing I focus to. So if I pull focus between two faces, but I've actually missed by 2 centimeters and I'm on the ear, not the eyes, I'm going to struggle to see that in my little 1280 viewfinder. But the camera's going to go, "Ooh, you've just a bit buzzed there," boop, and it's going to put it across through to the eyes. Or even if I pull focus to an
Yeah.
object and I'm not quite there, the camera's smart enough to go, Well, he's taking the focus 99% of there.
I'm
He
giving you the
probably
last
wants it
1%,
there,
yeah.
and the camera can pop there. So I'm totally in control of this focus as per manual ring. But if I'm just off, the camera's
fixes
going
it.
to take control.
Yeah.
Look, we can't go into the autofocus because it is such a complex thing.
You can spend a lot of time talking about
Yeah.
all the variables.
Is there times where it doesn't work?
Oh, without doubt. And we couldn't break it.
Or modes specifically. that doesn't work
Absolutely.
in.
We didn't test it sufficiently to see where those points are breaking. And I'm not quite sure in the hurly-burly of a
Kind of run and
reality
gun,
show,
yeah.
documentary style bun fight where you have no idea what's going to happen, how useful it would always be. But there is a thumbstick control and zone control. So we can have an two of you, and I can just flick across and make sure it's on the right-hand side. I can do incredible things like tell the camera, focus on Matt, ignore Ben and Tom. So it'll recognise your face over my face and Ben's face.
So if you were doing
up to 8 people.
Yeah, if you were doing a reality show or even a drama for that matter, but definitely in a reality show where there's unpredictable stuff going on, and your camera was dedicated to following Matt,
Yeah.
then you'd lock it onto his face, and no matter what's going on in the frame,
Yeah.
it's going to prioritise
To
him.
be totally-
That's a great.
The sheer configurable nature
Yeah.
of the autofocus probably makes it equally as handy for drama because you can set it up specifically for each
absolutely.
shot.
Yeah.
So the focus puller can go, okay, well, this mode's going to work best here. I might take control at this point
Yeah.
of the focus over.
Yeah.
Autofocus, you never want to make the mistake that autofocus will focus the camera for you. It's still your job to tell the camera what needs to be in focus. The
Yeah.
camera's only just making sure it is in focus, and there will be obviously
So it's not-
creative moments
yeah.
where you don't want stuff in focus.
So and also, it's not idiot proof. It's just a tool that gives you a lot of power and a lot of options.
If I was on a drama, it can just save me one take in every setup.
Yeah, yeah.
If even there are 1 in 100. Well, 1 in 100. There are individual focus pullers who can nail everything.
Yeah.
They have magic in their fingers. I don't know how they do it. They're weirdos.
And they get the big bucks.
They get the big bucks. Absolutely, do get the big bucks.
do.
Absolutely, for that reason.
Yeah.
It's very hard to get those guys, and I work with a lot of very talented focus pullers. But they often need some do a run, do a practice. Okay, you're going to be there. This is going to happen.
Yep.
It's a lot of work. If alternatively we can go, okay, lock onto this guy.
Yeah.
I want him sharp. He's the star, and it happens. Then
So for
Probably
low
nice
budget
if there
drama,
was a system where something was built into the actual lens in the future from Sony, where a focus puller could actually directly communicate with the
Absolutely.
lens instead of having to go through a focus.
I
mode.
mean, what you're talking about is combining a lot of existing technology there into that, which
Yes.
I think would be
You'd have the best
fantastic.
of both worlds.
Yeah, you absolutely would.
that would be Venice grade. And I wouldn't be surprised, and I have no idea, have no connection to Sony at all, that this technology is being trialled in the FX9, and that technology will come to
Hopefully
a camera
in
like the
something
Venice,
like a Venice Mark
sensor.
II.
As a cinematographer, you can choose to use it, you can choose not to.
Yeah.
But if you've got a focus puller man running down the corridor and and it's going to be a tough one, and the focus puller can go, lock onto that guy,
Yeah.
and we do it, and the first take, it's done, then I
The
don't
first
think
take
many
and the
cinematographers are going to fight
51st
it.
take.
Yeah.
If it's on the first take and the 51st take.
Yeah,
it's,
it
you
won't
know,
replace a
that's-
focus puller.
No, but
yeah.
working with a focus puller, it
Yeah.
takes it to a whole different level.
I actually think it's one of the most exciting things in this camera.
Yeah,
for
absolutely.
the
Totally
industry.
agree with that. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So tests are all good and well, but people want to actually see footage, and you
Yes.
actually went out with the camera and shot in
Yes.
some quite challenging conditions.
Yes.
Where did you go and what did you shoot?
Well, we thought, let's find a high contrast, difficult scene. So, we, of course, being in Australia, we went to the beach. We went down at pre-dawn. So we wanted to see what this 4000 ASA would look like. So we started the shoot before the sun had risen, and when you've got that lovely golden hour early light,
Yeah, yeah.
and then once the Australian sun comes up, you've suddenly got a nuclear reactor blasting at you. And so we thought we took no reflectors, not even a flexi fill. We'll play the video. I will add that the camera in its present state, if you go to S&Q mode, which is Sony's
Off speed.
weird off-speed thing, you're in 2K.
Yeah.
Most people will be shooting right across the sensor, but supply 1920 to 1080.
Going to the slow mo, in the 2K mode, it is still using the whole sensor and just
Most importantly.
down-resing that
Not
rather
getting a big
than
crop
cropping.
and used to.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, so
Okay, well, let's have a
let's
look.
have a look at this test.
You can see at the beginning here, we're pre-dawn. We're in 4,000 ASA.
So that's a very low light level.
Yes, and we are in Cine EI mode here. You can see in this shot, all the lights of the houses are still on.
So
And
what
they're
frame
playing.
rate are you at here?
Good, Ben. I think we shot every single shot's at 60 frames.
Yeah. Which, for shooting people,
Is a nice
is
frame.
a nice frame rate.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
Much above 60 frames, human movement starts to take on a weird...
Or begins to become boring.
Yeah.
Unless someone's doing something incredibly athletic.
Like, if you're talking about macro stuff, then sure, higher frame
Absolutely.
rates,
And
great. But for shooting this kind of stuff...
Water
60 's
explosions,
good.
you
Yeah,
can certainly go
yeah.
faster. So I think the 4K rates for the camera will be in that 50-60 range.
And these are pretty high dynamic range scenes.
Huge.
Absolutely.
And the
yes.
highlight roll-off on the sun there is really quite
nice.
subtle.
I will add all these footage has been put into Resolve.
Yep.
I did the grade myself, so I apologise for that because there's people more talented than me.
I think it looks very presentable.
But so I've pulled some of these shadows up to see what's in there. When you do pull them up, you do see that, as you mentioned, you do sometimes see some noise. But again, it's that kind of finer grain noise, which is just visually quite acceptable.
Yeah.
And you could argue, in many productions that I've worked on, we've done beautiful, clean pictures, and then we've added the grain, film-like
And look,
grain.
there's plenty of big blockbuster films
Absolutely, yeah.
at this point in time are adding a fine grain.
Yeah, it adds an organic value that has an aesthetic value.
Yes, yeah.
But
So
here we've
it's
got
not
the sun
necessarily a
directly on
problem.
her face. I think I did crank the camera to absolute maximum here. I'd have to go back to the metadata. But it's probably 75 to 100.
And skin tones are looking nice. And,
Absolutely.
And the lips are actually looking like a correct sort of colour
Yeah.
of red, which was a problem with previous Sony cameras.
Absolutely. And I will add, when I've done the grade, I've done nothing with the skin tones. Nothing.
Wow.
That's I've just filled with exposure to make sure it fits in, pulled some highlights down, brought some shadows up. So, to me, those images are more indicative of a higher budget, not wrong word, a more sophisticated cinema cameras.
Yeah.
I wouldn't pick that as a cheapy.
Definitely wouldn't.
I'm loath to call the FX9 a cheapy camera because it will be, I think, around 11,000 US or 18,000 Australian dollars. But
But
still,
it's a completely different ballpark to the very high-end cameras.
absolutely. And I will add, only 2 years ago, I think Red came out with a full-frame camera.
Yeah.
And we're talking serious money. Then Arri followed with the ELF only a year ago. 1 year later, Sony has a full-frame camera in this budget range,
Yeah.
which is amazingly impressive.
Yeah. I mean, 3 years ago, you couldn't get that kind of quality in full frame with those kind of features.
If this camera
No
was
matter
released
how much
3 years
money
ago,
you
it
threw
would have
at
been one of the top-line cinema cameras.
Easily.
Maybe 5 years ago. But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
it's a big step forward. I will add, you can have a look at some of these pictures, and I have asked this question to Sony, and maybe this will be irrelevant by the end. We were getting this weird purple highlighting. It is recorded into the log footage. I'm not sure what that highlight sparkle is. I exposed this shot because the sun had come up and it was very bright. So I exposed for the sun, but then she walks through the shade. But I've used this bit because it really shows what the camera can do with under.
Yep.
That's with the straight LUT Cinetone dropped on it. And then the next shot we see with a grade lifting it up. So we are stops and stops and stops under here.
Yeah.
And does it break up? Is it noisy? Yes. But dang, that's
It's very watchable.
it's at a pinch.
Yeah.
At a pinch usable. If that was an important shot, I know editors would go with it.
Yes.
If that was the golden moment.
Yep.
And I will add, in terms of our focus, that was all manual focus, which I focused by eye using the Sony viewfinder. And
That's so
was
that-
able
that
to
is-
nail most of it.
Yeah.
We were 2.8s, but 2.8 on a full frame camera is
It's not a lot of
the
depth of
autofocus
field.
doesn't work in S&Q.
yes, good point, Matt. Yes, nothing works in S&Q. So when I say that, in S&Q modes, you're losing, I think, almost all auto, including auto iris. I think I better double check that. Auto iris, auto focus, auto shutter.
Yeah.
You're on your own. I'm not sure all the processing the power
Probably a
of the camera.
processing limitation of the camera. Yeah, can't do
I
all those
suspect
things
so.
at once.
Could possibly change with firmware updates. I don't know.
Hmm.
Sony has made a lot of promises to keep this camera updated, and there's a whole list we might try and include at the end of the video
Yep.
of what that schedule is going to be. But at the moment in S&Q mode, because autofocus in S&Q would be awesome. Who knows? All right. So what should we look at next?
Ergonomics, I guess. When you've
Ergonomics.
just shown Vision that you shot with it, how easy was it to
Yeah.
actually shoot that material?
The camera is super lightweight. So
Yeah.
that's fabulous, no question. But very similar to the FS7, it is a front-weighted camera. The back of the camera sits on your shoulder and comes forward. If you're using lightweight lenses, that's not really problematic. But if you're putting on bigger and heavier lenses, you've got that front weight issue.
It is all sitting. It is all
Absolutely,
front.
yeah. And
Yeah.
you do have that lovely Sony handle, which is great. I will add they've not fixed the design of that, so if you put the camera down, the camera you
Won't
can't sit
sit
on the
flat.
ground.
Yeah.
It really should have a push button that you could just flick that thing up.
Yeah.
That would be nice, and I think Shape and a few others make that as third party. If I was a personal owner, I would have the V-lock adapter,
Yeah.
put some weight at the back. 'Cause I like
Especially
to
if
use
you're
heavier
going to
lenses.
shoot a lot of handheld with it, that would make a world of difference.
Yes.
Just having it positioned a bit better and the balance at the back.
And this really is the sort of camera that's going to be used a lot handheld.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, with the kit lens, it's all still nice and lightweight, but
Yeah.
ergonomics in terms of using the camera. Oh my God, I suppose we have to go there. Sony menus.
They have
I read a
improved.
400-page
They have
manual.
improved.
And I managed not to bash my head against the wall. I understand it's an owner-operator camera, so if you buy an FX9,
You will get to know it and you will find your way around that menu pretty comfortably.
you will learn.
Having said that, when we were doing the test, there were moments when there was 6 of us fairly nerdy cinematographers standing around going,
How
okay,
do we do
how do
that?"
we do X?
Yeah, Sony does allow you to build a user menu.
Yes.
So you can put your top 10 in. There are a whole bunch of buttons that are all configurable. So you can go a long way into sorting it out. You would never want to rent an FX9 and pick it up and think you could go. Having said that, you can build a configuration for an FX9, put it on an SD card, pick up a rental in a country, drop a card in, bang, it's your camera.
That's right. So if you're coming from that FS7 background and you know the FS7 menu system, then you're going to transition to
Yeah.
the FX9 pretty easily. If you're coming from a Venice or an F55 or an F5,
I will say, in
different
Sony's
story.
defense, they give you a tremendous amount of power in that menu system. That camera is, we have touched the surface. The networking,
barely. Yeah.
the ability for that camera to be configured remotely.
Yep.
There's just a whole bunch of amazing stuff. The proxies can be downloaded over the net as you shoot.
Yeah.
But with that power comes responsibility and complexity.
Yes.
Sony just stuff some things up. Like the Cinetone, which is wonderful. It's a lovely LUT. It's a great for the guys who want to hand over footage all prepared. But
Yeah,
Sony don't
for-
call it Cinetone. In a menu, it's called original.
See, that's odd.
What is original? So that forces you back to the manual. Going, what the? I mean, once you know,
You know.
but it's like,
Yeah.
why?
Yeah, yeah.
So look, look, they have made an effort with the menus, but it'd be very hard to.
There's a thing with the Sony menus where it often feels like they're avoiding saying something directly. It's always euphemism. So,
Yeah.
like original.
They invent new
Just
words.
tell us it's Cinetone, Cinetone.
Yeah, but look, again, you wouldn't want to give a fail, and certainly if you're a professional cinematographer, you are beholden any camera you pick up to read a manual,
Yeah.
understand
Get up to
how it
speed,
works,
shoot some tests.
prep it before you get to the shoot,
Yeah.
not
So
when
if
you get there.
For example, if you're going to shoot a doco over 6 weeks with this camera and you had a day of prep with it, you'd be fine.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, a day of prep and some tests.
Yes. Absolutely.
Shoot some stuff, stick it in, make sure you're happy. It would be lovely to see a Venice-style system where there was a simple user menu, which
Yeah.
ASA, shutter speed, all the things that cinematographer is going to use on a shot-by-shot basis, sitting up front of a menu system with all the complexity sitting behind, that when you need
The
it,
more
you dig
expensive
it.
the camera is, the easier it is to use.
Yeah.
That's the
No
irony
question,
of
yes,
that's the
yes.
irony of where we are in 2019, that you pay a premium for simplicity. And you know, not just in Sony, across the brands, there is
Yeah.
a premium for
Same with
a simple
Red,
to operate camera.
Yeah.
Now, in terms of inputs, outputs, two of the big new additions to the FX9, timecode and Genlock.
Yes, fantastic.
Something
All built
a
in.
lot of FS7
You don't
users
need
were
an
complaining about.
adapter. We got some disadvantages. You can't control the LUT on the different outputs now for some reason. Again,
Maybe firmware could be fixing firmware.
so it's what we talked a bit earlier. This is a camera built on a budget. It's also built to fit within a family line of other cameras, and it inevitably has some limitations, whether they be technical or whether for other reasons, and the camera can't do certain things. So the FX9 is capable of superb performance and a lot of things, but there are points, a whole series of points, camera speed being one of them, where this
All these
camera
compromises.
hits the headroom.
Yeah, it's it is built to fit in their spectrum of cameras, and when you look at it in that, this is a big step up from the FS7 Mark II, and it's a vastly cheaper camera than the Venice.
Yeah.
Those compromises make a lot of
Anamorphic
sense.
is probably the best example of that.
Yeah,
This is a camera, being a full frame sensor, is utterly capable of being anamorphic because it's got the full height. It's the perfect camera, Sony camera, to be shooting anamorphic. Sony's chosen not to put it in.
Yes. So you could shoot anamorphic on there. You just can't
Squeeze it.
de-squeeze it
Do your head in.
internally. You'd
I've
have
tried
to
it.
use an extra.
Or if you had a monitor, maybe.
If you had a monitor, yeah.
But that was a conscious choice on their part. Look, I have to question how many FX9 users would want to put anamorphic glass
I would say
on
a
to
lot
shoot.
want to.
But the reality of actually doing it,
is a whole different thing.
Having said, there's a whole bunch of super cheap anamorphic glass heading our way.
Yeah.
So
It's probably going to happen.
and Sony could change.
Yes, yeah. And it is the kind of thing that could change in a firmware update.
And
If they made that choice.
No 6K recording, that's probably the thing people are going to complain about. Whether they actually need it's another thing
Yeah.
altogether.
Look, my take on it, and I know some people see differently. I think for the users of this camera, the 6K to 4K output is a good thing. You get, in some ways, the best of both worlds. You get that wonderful oversampling from 6K, and I will add, you clearly see between the FS7 and the FX9 when you flip between the images, the clarity that 6K sensor gives the image over the FS7.
And that there you're really looking at the way that the Bayer pattern sensor works. Having that oversampling is vastly more significant than it sounds at first glance.
Now, some would argue, well, why can't we have access to that full 6K? But to be totally honest, the camera is doing a good job of downsampling you to 4K. With a 6K camera, you've probably only got around 4K resolution anyway, maybe a bit more. I mean, but by getting 4K, your file sizes are reasonable.
Yep.
It's more manageable.
I think with the
giving away you are giving away something, no
Yeah.
question. But I think 90% of people, they're not leveraging that extra.
Definitely. And I think for the internal recording, that makes so much sense. I think it's a really sensible thing that they've done with the internal recording to keep that to 4K. Also because the workflow matches the FS7.
Yes.
So people don't
Hand
need
it
to
over.
reinvent any workflow there.
Yeah.
So that, I think, makes perfect sense. Where I'm struggling a little bit with the logic is that the raw recording is also going to downsample to 4K. Now, maybe that will work brilliantly. I'm going to reserve judgment on that till I see it.
Yes.
I am struggling a bit with the logic of that. I'm not sure why.
I mean, the FS7 was a mid-tier bread and butter workhorse camera.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
I think for the majority of people who were using it, the type of internal recording they were doing, I mean, I don't know how many people were actually shooting raw on an FS7 or FS7
Good
Mark
question.
II.
I don't know.
Probably not many.
Not many.
Yeah.
And probably most people are probably still delivering in HD.
Yes.
So I think Sony have probably done the right thing. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Just come out with something that is
I think so.
upgraded and offers a few more advantages over an FS7
Yeah.
Mark II.
Yeah.
The raw recorder may offer some advantages. I will add, if you pixel peep on the FX9 footage, you clearly see the processing this camera's doing and the nature of the XAVC codec. If you pixel peep.
Yeah.
If you use the raw recorder or you need an adapter, then you need to buy a separate third-party recorder. So what this all adds up to be is unknown at this stage.
Yeah, but it's not a bargain solution for RAW.
Yeah, and you'll end up, I think, with a higher bit depth.
Yep.
What it's all going to be, I'm not 100% certain. I don't know if it's going to be really worth. I think once you've got all that palaver, just upgrade the camera.
Go to a Venice.
Bigger, better camera for that job. If you're going to make a movie, shoot a film, and it was VFX heavy, you'd be not using an FX9.
Yeah.
That would not be the
It
smart.
would be a stretch.
Yeah, the VFX people would thump you.
Yeah.
But for a lot of other things, I mean, I've got a job possibly where I have to go into a third world country to shoot a drama. I'm a personal owner of a Red Monstro. I love the camera. It's a beautiful camera. The thought of running that camera in a third world country where even power is an issue makes me look at the FX9 and think, oh my God.
There's a lot to like.
There's a lot. This is a practical
Long
utility.
battery run times, long media run times, very crucial for
flexibility
things like
with lenses.
It's untested, but I don't think anyone would challenge Sony reliability. They know how to build tough cameras that
They've
go
been doing it
on
a long
and
time.
on. They might look a bit plasticky, but I don't think you'd want to underestimate Sony's depth of engineering knowledge in building reliable machines.
Yep.
They're good.
Yeah.
So
another way I can imagine the FX9 being used very successfully is, say, on a bigger production where Venice is your A camera and you want to have something to poke into a tight spot. Not that the Venice is a big camera, but if you've got it fully configured as your A camera, to have something that's lightweight and small to poke into a tight spot or to put on a gimbal. And even on a bigger production, to be able to run from your A camera to suddenly you've got the FX9.
The autofocus if someone has to do it by themselves.
Exactly. You've got it with the autofocus on there, and maybe your B camera operator is just running with that while your focus puller is on A camera. I can imagine a lot of productions would find that incredibly useful to be able to.
Or even someone, doing 2 camera sit-down interviews by themselves where they have to lock one camera off, the ability to have the autofocus on there, just go and set and forget. So now we're going to have a look at a very technical test. Now this is designed to show how well a camera's sensor reacts to certain colours.
Yeah, so this is a test. We got Powell Actal to do this test. A lot of people talk about colour science. Powell actually is a scientist. He's got a PhD in this stuff, and he has a tool that's designed specifically for doing this, and it breaks up the light into its component parts, and so it's seeing colours, but monochromatic colours. It's only a single colour of light that's hitting the sensor. There's no lens involved. It projects directly onto the sensor, so it's a very pure technical test to look at the spectrum, the gamut that the sensor is actually reproducing.
And how much should people read into this test?
I think it's a good indication of what the camera is doing at the front end. It's a good indication of what the sensor's gathering. It is a purely scientific test. It's not an aesthetic test. Doesn't really give us much information about the aesthetics, but it does give us information about the pure tones that the camera can reproduce relative to Rec 709 or Rec 2020 color spaces, which are quite different.
Yeah, every camera has a very complex digital signal path, and
not to mention post-production.
Yeah, but so this test is telling us what information and what range of color information is being fed into that system.
Yeah.
What the camera then does with it is a ginormously complicated piece of coding.
Yeah. So it's not definitively telling us what the camera's capable of, it's telling us what it's starting with.
Yes, absolutely. Well, let's have a look at that. We started with the FS7, what it is capable of doing, as a benchmark for us. That's a picture of our monochromator, and here you can see the light broken down into its frequencies. So the FS7 was quite good, had accurate reproduction, especially in greens and blues. You can see it going well past 709 in the central triangle.
Which lots of cameras don't do.
Yes.
They don't do well in those necessarily.
But the FS7 did not produce particularly well when the reds get saturated. And
Which is surprising.
And you can see, obviously, in Rec 2020, in that bottom right-hand side, it's not really even a
Struggling
go,
a bit.
and it's even incapable of covering 709.
Yeah, yeah.
So a deeply saturated red colour with the FS7 is going to be pushed to magenta. Once you get this sort of inaccuracy, you can make it challenging to get accurate warm tones, especially if you want to preserve your greens and blues.
Yes.
So that makes the DSP work that much harder. And I will add those warm tones where skin sits.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's push on to our FX9. And I've got to say, we're all a little surprised by the result here. Obviously, has excellent wide production in the greens, better than any other camera that we've put this test through. We won't mention every camera. We put probably
Most of the high-end cameras.
almost all the high-end cameras through,
Yeah.
I think. It's very good accuracy in the ranges of blues as well. That's not uncommon with a lot of the other cameras.
I think
but
there was when we presented this here at the ACS HQ, there was an audible gasp in the room when Powell explained how significantly better this was than anything else he'd tested.
yeah. And you can see, especially when we look down here in the reds, obviously it's covering 709 with ease, but it's pushing the reds right into that far right corner. So the accuracy with which that camera can differentiate between different frequencies of red is excellent. And it's almost coming right into Rec 2020. The very far right, you see a little bit of shift towards magenta, but in Powell's mind,
tiny.
that's easily correctable. But in his mind, the FX9 Center was the best he'd seen in any camera in
Full
terms
stop.
of its ability to see color.
Pure color.
We also did a little test. We put a chroma key up with the FS7 and the FX9. We got both our models to wear green just to make it tough for the camera. So we just dropped this into Final Cut, did an automatic chroma key without making any real effort. Both cameras did surprisingly well. The obviously we saw the green jackets the girls are wearing. The spill suppressor pushed them their hue around.
Yep.
Looks like almost 180 degrees. We then did a hue to hue selection, I think it is, and we could push some of those greens back. This is where the FX9 did better.
Right,
than
which
the
is
FS7.
probably that tighter noise.
Tighter
structure
noise
is-
and better color accuracy.
Yeah, yep.
But the FS7 did well, and there wasn't a ginormous difference between the chroma keys in this particular situation.
Yep.
So we've only just sort of scratched the surface here. This is just sort of an
we
overview,
certainly have, yeah.
and there's
Yeah.
a lot more comprehensive tests if people
Yeah.
want to look for them online.
Absolutely.
For the FX9.
Alistair Chapman,
Yeah.
cvp.com. Check those out.
Really in-depth functionality of the cameras and all that sort of overview is there.
So in terms of sort of a wrap up, how would you summarise the FX9?
Look, I think the big things in the FX9 is we're seeing full frame sensor, the color science, that high-end color science from the Venice, and the autofocus, these three big headline features coming into a package and the functionality of the FS7. And I think for anybody who's comfortable with an FS7 and likes the FS7 and wants those features, it's a no-brainer. It's, that's where it sits.
Yeah.
And anyone needing to step up from an FS7, it's a very logical step. Or as someone looking for something to accompany, say, a Venice or an F55.
Yeah.
So would you say it's a fair in-between solution between people who want something better than FS7 but don't have the money for a Venice?
Absolutely. Look, to be totally honest, I think it's even clearer than that. Presently, when we're doing this video, FS7 is about 9,000 USD. The FX9 is coming in 11,000. The FX9 is such an obviously superior camera at every level that I personally would, if I was buying a camera, I would not buy an FS7. It's a capable camera, and frankly, if you want to stay with Super 35 and you're not interested in full frame, if you've got a thing against it, you don't like it, then
Or
it's
if you
not the
had
camera.
a pool of FS7s and you needed another one, sure.
Yeah. If you already have them. But if I was buying a camera today and I was looking at the FS7 and the FX9 for only that small amount of money, I know that my work would look so much better on the FX9 than the FS7. That would be a help for my career, clients, because people are just going to look at stuff, especially if they're clients who are just looking for stuff straight out of the box. So they're going to be looking at the cine tone, they'll be looking at color tone. skin tones, and people are going to look handsome. They're going to look good
I
straight
think
out of the box.
the autofocus alone is probably worth the extra.
No question. I'm super excited by the autofocus.
Yeah.
I think that's got a long way to go to really cross through the entire industry, but we're seeing the crest of a wave
Absolutely.
in the distance,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
you can see it
If you were
coming.
an FS7 owner, would you pull the pin and upgrade?
I would.
I would wait till there was a project that justified it.
Yeah.
But it's a significant step up. But would you upgrade just because that's there? It certainly doesn't invalidate the FS7 as a workhorse camera.
Yeah. But generally, on a much broader note, the FX9 is an indication of just how quickly technology is moving.
Yeah.
Only literally
It's
a
not
year or
slowing
two
down.
ago, this was serious, cutting edge stuff. Autofocus was a joke.
Yeah, it's certainly
here we are.
not something that's there on the high end cameras at all.
Yeah. So we've got full frame. We've got a whole bunches of other we haven't talked about. Whole bunches of other improvements, all moved up another peg on this camera.
Yep.
And all at an amazing price.
The other thing as well, I guess, is like you as a Monstro owner, the FX9 is a completely different type of camera.
Yeah.
So
It's a different philosophy.
different
Design
philosophy.
philosophy.
So,
Yeah.
and so it's a different type of work that you would do with an FX9 compared to a digital cinema camera that doesn't have things like the autofocus features.
Yeah. And for all my enthusiasm for the FX9, FX9 is not going to be shooting Hollywood dramas.
No.
It'll
Low
be shooting
budget
a
dramas
lot of
for
television.
sure. Low budget dramas.
Absolutely, yeah.
Reality TV,
Yes.
corporates, absolutely.
Yeah. You could do a low budget movie and it would look good.
For a high end doco, I think there's a
Fantastic.
lot to be said for it. Like
Lot
as
to
a
be
camera to be traveling with, as a camera to be doing long interviews with,
Snow,
there's-
ice,
yeah.
heat. Yeah. The Sony
Definitely.
eat it up.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I would say this is definitely our perspective. It's our first impression of a pre-production model. It's I think the beginning of getting to know this camera, and it's definitely we've gone for qualitative rather than huge quantitative analysis of it.
Yeah.
But I think what we're seeing is that there's this camera. It fills a niche in the market. There was a gap there that this plugs.
Yeah, and you need to. The camera's coming on the market now. You really need to get out there, grab an FX9, shoot your own stuff, see what you think, and good luck.